You are now listening to the War Report Podcast Network.
Yes, sir. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Just a Sec Pod right here on the War Report Network. I'm Dustin Smith. I got my buddy Josh Mahler from the Sooners Spotlight with us today to talk a little Oklahoma Sooners football. Got a big bowl game matchup on the way versus Navy. First year in the SEC in the books. But Josh, let's start right here at the quarterback position where Oklahoma is making big moves. Jackson Arnold moves on to Auburn. And then John Mateer coming in, the big transfer from Washington State, 6'1", 219. He's a big body and some good numbers, man. He was the hottest commodity in the portal. 3,139 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions last year for the Washington State Cougars. So just what does this mean for Oklahoma, man? How big of a get is this for Oklahoma's head coach? I know he's coming over with his OC from Washington State, and then moving on from the big five-star Jackson Arnold, who just coming into last season was kind of the hope, right? He was kind of the plan for the future. And as we see in college football in 2024, things move fast, man. It's fluid. Things can change at the drop of a hat. And here you are with a new quarterback in the room, but I got to feel like the Sooner faithful are pretty excited about this pickup.
Yeah, you got the optimists and then the pessimists and then the guys that are right in between. I think I'm right in between where, I like what we got. I like Michael Hawkins. I never thought that he should have been the starter this past season, but I like him. I'm glad that he's willing to stick around and fight through, and battle it out to try to become the starting quarterback, even though that John Mateer is coming in. But I mean, then you got the ones that are super pessimistic, where, we already got Michael Hawkins. Why not just train him up? Then you got the other ones that are just all head over heels over John Mateer. And I'm somewhere right there in the middle. I like John Mateer a lot. He shows a lot of poise. He shows a lot of smarts. He's got a very high football IQ from what I can see on tape. And you know what? Ben Arbuckle has been known to put some guys out. He's coached guys like Bailey Zappi, Cam Ward, just sent him off over to Miami. And then now what John Mateer has done. So, I mean, he's got the record of what he can do. And then you got this guy coming in 6'1", about 215 pounds. So I like what I see from him. And there's a lot of comps of Baker Mayfield, and I hated it at first. And I go and watch him pass the ball, and he does pass the ball like Baker Mayfield, but he's much more athletic and a lot faster than Baker Mayfield. So I'm pretty excited about it. I think Oklahoma and overall the Sooner Nation's pretty excited to get him in.
Josh, I'm never going to let an opportunity to hype up my Tampa Bay Buccaneers go by.
Oh, yeah.
How good does it feel to see Baker balling out this year, man?
Oh, I love it. I love it. Baker is my number one Sooner just because, I think he won me over 100% to be my favorite Sooner just because I was there in the horseshoe when he planted the flag. And then now you got all the controversy going on now. But, yeah, I love the dude. I love that he's balling out down in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, man. He just he needed a shot, and whenever you got Mike Evans over there, it's just throw it up. But he's doing his thing, and got a pretty good left tackle and right tackle helping him out. So let's go there, man. Banged up on the offensive side of the football this year for Oklahoma, or this past year, right? Offensive line banged up. At one point, you guys were just finding anybody who could go out there and line up as a wide receiver and try to throw the ball to him. So kind of looking at what Oklahoma has addressed so far in the portal, anything else you feel like they need to address? What is Oklahoma doing to just kind of put some weapons around John Mateer? Because I would think he wouldn't be just coming in here if there wasn't a solid plan in place to put an offense around him that's competent.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned it too. The offensive line was banged up all season long. That was the first and probably the biggest initial problem, because that was what came out before the season even started, was that, hey, this offensive line is kind of getting banged up. And then on top of that, last year we just didn't have a lot of guys that even took a whole lot of snaps. And so we were hopeful. We got one of the best offensive line coaches in the nation in Bill Bedenbaugh. So we were hopeful with what he could do. But then whenever you get your starting lineup, 4 guys kind of injured in and out throughout the season, and then other guys below that even injured throughout the season. So, I mean, you have to take a look at that. And, some of those guys that didn't really produce much have moved on. We had a couple transfer out. And, we ended up going after in recruiting and the recruiting ranks and going after a couple of guys. You got Michael Fasusi was the big one. And then you also got Foje that's coming over. So, I mean, you got 2 guys that are going to be really young to kind of add to the depth at the very least. And then on top of that, you got Baklenko that we just got from Stanford. And then here just the other day, we ended up getting a big time guy that I think a lot of Oklahoma fans are just looking and seeing where he came from. But you got Derek Simmons coming over, and it's a big time guy, a guy that was recruited by a lot, and then you go to the wide receiver corps. That's where, man, Oklahoma was hurting big time this past season. And then we had a few guys hit the portal that we wanted to keep, and then a few other guys that it makes sense why they hit the portal. But then this past offseason so far, the transfer portal has not been kind. We lost I think 5 or 6 of those wide receivers to the portal, and so you bring in a guy like Keontez Lewis who I think a lot of people are again, you're going to look at these FCS guys and not really give them the full respect. But I mean, he's one of those guys that's pretty highly rated. And when you look at the industry and what they've got him on the board, he's one guy that we got. Actually just signed. I think it was just yesterday. Signed Isaiah Sategna from Arkansas, which that was a big pickup. He's a kind of a small, speedy guy. That's a guy that you love to be able to pick up and a guy that you love to add to it. And you also have Giovanni Gibson, who comes over, another guy that, he comes from Arkansas Pine Bluff. You're not going to be super excited, but this is a guy that a lot of the, industry, a lot of the recruiting industry, especially On3, is even ranking him above some of the other guys that we either let go, through the transfer portal, or some of the other guys that we were going after in the transfer portal. So I'm pretty excited. I see the size that we're adding in the wide receiver corps around John Mateer and what we're trying to build up, because we're trying to get these bigger framed guys, and even if they may not stand very tall, like Giovanni Gibson, he's only 6'2", which is still a pretty good size to have at wide receiver, but he's 205 and loves to block whenever he gets the opportunity and puts his full weight into it. So over on the offensive side of the ball, I think that's where we're really attacking, is trying to get those key playmakers out there, not necessarily guys that are going to come from a Power 4 school, but guys that are going to show you good production.
Yeah. Are y'all just kind of at the point as a fan base, or at least you individually, where you're just like, hey, as long as Venables is here, the defense is going to be okay. It's the offensive side of the ball that we got to kind of get figured out here. Is it just like a trust in the defense? Hey, whatever happens here, it's going to work out.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. I think
Yeah.
you trust Brent Venables quite a bit on the defense, but then he brought Zach Alley in, and as long as we can keep him around, I know there's a lot of rumors going around. From what I've heard, that's all just rumors and like kind of
Mm.
really dumb rumors to me. But as long as we can keep Zach Alley around too, he's what made this defense go from progressively better to holy cow, look how good this defense is this past season, and they were able to prove that and won us some games, and of course kept us in just about every game. And it was the offense that ended up losing it. So yeah, we have pretty high faith and pretty high hopes in the defense going forward.
Right. It makes it a little less confusion for you, because as an Auburn fan, you're watching the defense carry you whenever the head coach is an offensive head coach. And it's like, this kind of muddies it up. This kind of muddies it up a little bit. At least on that side, it's like, hey, if he can just get the right coordinator in here, then you feel like it's going to go in the right direction. I do want to ask you this, though, and I know, Josh, that a lot of the Sooner fans, they don't want to hear this. They don't want to think about this. But tomorrow, we're recording this on Friday, December 20th. Tomorrow, the Texas Longhorns are going to take on Clemson in the playoff game. Texas and Oklahoma, longtime rivals, one of the best rivals in college football. Everybody knows that. But very different years, right? Oklahoma goes 6-6. It's going to take on Navy in the Armed Forces Bowl. Texas is preparing for a playoff matchup versus Clemson. Does it being the first year in the SEC, particularly, and then the way it played out with Texas going to the SEC championship game, playing in a classic game versus Georgia, almost pulling it out, and then making the playoffs, how much pressure does it? Because it's always going to be pressure coaching Oklahoma. I understand that. But how much pressure does the success of Texas put on what's probably already a hot seat, right, for Coach Brent Venables coming into this next season?
Yeah, I think it's got to be a lot of pressure, and it's something that I don't think Oklahoma fans want to admit, just because hey, we owned Texas in the last decade, and even dating back to World War II, we basically have owned them. We've come away on the upper hand, but that doesn't really matter. What matters is not just beating them, but going on and having a successful season. And even in the years that they've been able to beat us, we've at least been able to back it up by saying, yeah, you beat us, but we were able to go and have the better season. Now they kind of did that to us, where not only did they have the better season, they had the better season in the first season in the SEC, and now they're in the playoffs. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure. I think when you look, because these two teams came over together. Now, if Texas would have came over 2 years in advance or something, and then we had to try to follow in their shoes, there would have still been some pressure, but not nearly as much as there is with both of you coming over to the SEC at the same time. And let's be honest, Oklahoma looked exactly how SEC, chirpers were kind of making it sound like they would look, and they looked terrible. And you can make it up to the excuses of injuries and all that kind of stuff all you want, which that might be some of the reason why that happened, but you still got to perform better. And Oklahoma fans expected more. This is a program that 8 wins is a down year for us. That's
Right.
that's what we expect from this team. And we've fared well against SEC opponents in the past in bowl games and non-conference games, things like that. So there's no excuse, and we're not trying to feed any of those excuses, but rather, hey, next season we need to see something big. You got your offensive coordinator hire. Figure that out, because I think a lot of fans are ready to put him on the hot seat. Specifically, if the offense can't perform this season, then hey, you're obviously not doing it as a head coach.
Yeah, for sure. Feels like with that rivalry, it's kind of the opposite of what Ryan Day's got going on up there at Ohio State. It's like he can't beat the guy, but he can do everything else. And then at Oklahoma right now, it's like, hey, we can handle Texas. It's just everything.
Yeah.
But so listen, dude, sitting here at 6-6, going up against it's a very interesting bowl matchup versus Navy. Anytime you had to play one of these service academies, you're going to be facing an offense that you don't see a whole lot. How much does that worry you? And then just sitting at 6-6, it always makes the bowl game weird to me, because we're in this era now where bowl games don't mean as much. But if you're 6-6, it's the difference between a winning and a losing season. And just perception wise, to me, that stands out a great deal. So just your kind of thoughts on this bowl game and how important it is getting to that winning season.
Yeah, it's totally different than Brent Venables' first year to his third year, where we were 6-6 in both seasons. But at least that first year, you kind of wrote a lot of it off. Hey, 6-6 is really not that bad of a season after losing your, half your roster and taking over the dumpster fire that he took over. And then 6-6, you go to a bowl game and you end up going against, I believe, a 9-3 Florida State team, and played really well against them, and just barely couldn't pull out the win there. And so that one felt like, hey, we really want to win this so we can have a winning season first year. This one feels like, you really want to win it, but I don't know how much it really does for your program. It feels, you expected an 8. I feel like a lot of Sooner fans were saying, yeah, we might fall down to 7 wins, but 8 wins is like the least we're going to get. And we put together 6, but at the same time, the way that everything fell together towards the end of the season, and the fact that you were 1 game away from bowl eligibility and you just couldn't make it over the mark. You kept on losing games that you shouldn't lose to. You lost to South Carolina when you shouldn't have lost that game, and it was really just Michael Hawkins turning it from 0-0 to 21-0 real quick in the first quarter. And then, right after that, then you lose to Missouri by kind of letting them bounce back and get these big time plays when they needed it. But then you're able to finish it off by beating Alabama. And I mean, you know how that feels as an Auburn fan.
I miss it. I miss it, Josh.
Yeah, beating Alabama and just really not just beating them, just pummeling them down and then keeping them out of the playoffs. On top of that, just kind of throwing that in there. But winning, the 6th game that way makes you feel some kind of way as a Sooner fan, and it makes you feel at least proud that, hey, at least we got to a bowl game when we thought for sure we were just going to end with 5 and kind of move on from there. So, this matchup, it is kind of a cool matchup. It's a bowl game that I think is kind of a little bit honorable to be a part of. At least, you're in the Armed Forces Bowl, kind of paying some kind of honor to the military, and so that's pretty cool. And then you go on against the Navy, which is another kind of cool aspect of it. And so you just saw how Navy performed against a pretty good Army team.
It showed out.
And so, hey, I'm not writing this team off, and Oklahoma's still going to have that good defense, and I think we're going to be able to do okay. But a lot of the way that our defenders, you take like a guy like R. Mason Thomas, what he is best at is a pass rush, and he's not going to get a whole lot of that. He's going to have a whole lot of run in his face, and it's going to be a whole lot of trickery type of run too, where it's going to be based off of where he's at, and so there's a lot of guys like that on defense where, we've got DBs. They're not going to be doing a whole lot in the pass game, but rather having to adjust. And so it's going to be an interesting game to say the least. And then on offense, what can we do? Are we just going to turn that triple option right back around on him because we got Michael Hawkins in on the game? I don't know. I'm kind of interested. And Ben Arbuckle's not calling the offense. It's still going to be Joe John Finley. So interested to see what we can do. And I think if Michael Hawkins can have a good game and we can show something with him, I think that gives us a little bit of hope going forward, especially with him.
Yeah, I think you'd have to imagine they're going to be using his legs a whole lot,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, Josh, I can't let you get out of here without asking. Mentioned it there at the beginning about the quarterback that just left. I kind of saw you on Twitter and going back and forth on our War Report group chat because obviously it's a Auburn heavy over there at the at the War Report network. But you were just kind of saying that you like Jackson Arnold, you love his physical tools, you love his abilities and his traits, but you have some concerns about his decision making in an RPO system. And I gotta be honest with you now, that raises some red flags because Auburn just went through this last quarterback situation where Peyton Thorne, where we kind of got told in the middle of the season, hey, we got to dumb down the playbook because Peyton Thorne's not processing the RPO system the way that he needs to. I just gotta have to ask you, man, how do you see this Jackson Arnold Hugh Freeze marriage working out? Like, what's the floor and what's the ceiling, and how can Auburn get the best out of him?
Yeah, I mean, Jackson Arnold ran the RPO system back in high school and did it at a very high level. Then he comes over to Oklahoma. He's on the bench most of the season, the first year, but even when he was in, you saw the little glimmers of hope out of him. You saw him be able to air the ball out. You saw him be able to use his legs, and so I don't have any kind of doubts that he's able to run an RPO offense. It's just this past season, that was what his struggle was. You go back to that Tennessee game, that's the game that got him benched. And it was all because of the RPO. The biggest one that stands out to me was that he threw the ball kind of backward, it was a backwards pass. He threw the ball out to the tight end Bauer Sharp when that wasn't even a part of the RPO that he was supposed to have been running. Like that was just he just happened to be over there. And I'm not sure what Bauer Sharp was doing either because that's another guy that's kind of been a liability to the Oklahoma offense all season long too. But it's things like that there's so much confusion and it is a difficult offense to run as a quarterback. You have to make several reads all in a split second, and so that's a very difficult thing to do. The difference I see though with Oklahoma is that he had a guy in Seth Luttrell teaching him this RPO offense, which was a little bit different style of an RPO offense than what Hugh Freeze runs. But you've got Seth Luttrell teaching it to you or Hugh Freeze. Who would you rather? I'd take Hugh Freeze all day. And so I do think if Hugh Freeze uses the RPO correctly with him and he teaches him up a little bit better than what I think Seth Luttrell was able to do, which I think Hugh Freeze is capable of doing so. I think Jackson Arnold can be a great asset to Auburn. I think the fit makes sense because you go back to his high school days. Like I said, he ran that RPO offense and he ran it at a high level. But can Hugh Freeze bring back that out of Jackson Arnold? And on top of that, I think a lot of the miscommunication in the RPO with him last season for Oklahoma was just the fact that he had no offensive line blocking for him. So, with that RPO, you've got a split second to make that decision, but you've already got a defender in your face. And now you're trying to make the throw with a guy in your face when that's supposed to be the throw and you just can't make it there. So, I think that's something also that Auburn is going to be able to offer him an offensive line where Oklahoma wasn't able to do that this past season.
You watched all the snaps for Oklahoma this year. I did not. So when I see 9 fumbles lost by Jackson Arnold or 9
Yeah.
fumbles, at least was that offensive line you mentioned, was that a big part of that, or does he have a problem holding on to the football?
Yeah, I mean, so I can recall, go back to the Missouri game and watch that last, it would have been the last like 5 minutes, just hectic game.
Mm.
Jackson Arnold ends up fumbling the ball, ends up turning into a scoop and score when the game's all tied. He shouldn't have been put in that situation, but that's one of those situations where the line collapsing on him time and time again gets him with those happy feet, and he starts to try to run out of the pocket when he shouldn't have, and it gets slapped out of his hands. That's a majority of his fumbles. I feel like it's been a lot of that pressure, and then you have some other ones where I think you had a couple of them where a guy just tomahawks from behind. I don't really blame a guy for that because I've had that happen to me, and that's tough to hold on to. So I can't totally blame him for that kind of stuff, but there's other times where I think it's just a problem with knowing when to cover it up and when not to. And you take out pretty much everything before, I guess, before the South Carolina game, everything after that South Carolina game. Jackson Arnold didn't really fumble the ball. He really didn't throw any, I don't think, any interceptions since that game. So I mean, you saw him turn around on the turnovers quite a bit in that last half of the season when we were really trying to fight for bowl eligibility or something to turn around. And so he does have a problem with holding on to the ball, but I don't think that's something that's always the case. I would kind of put a little bit of that, kind of on the circumstances around him, because you look at the Alabama game, he ran the ball a ton, didn't put the ball on the ground at all. So I think you can trust him, to hold on to the ball going forward. I think that is kind of ingrained into his brain now.
I got you. Well, hey, I think it's safe to say, Josh, that with John Mateer and Brett Venables, it better work. With Hugh Freeze and Jackson Arnold, it better work. These guys are, the clock ticking on both these guys. Josh, I want to thank you for joining me today. Tell everybody how they can find you over there at the Sooner Spotlight.
Yeah, you can search Sooner Spotlight on YouTube. You can also go over, I'm on X. It's just at Real Josh Mahler. That's the only thing that we've got for Sooner Spotlight. So if you want to follow me and more that I do, that's over there. Otherwise, SoonerSpotlight.com is another way to find everything that we do over there.
Yes, sir. All right, man. Well, y'all hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. You can find me on Twitter at DMcShaw28. If you call it X now, good for you. But you can find me over there. Find me over there with my guy Blake on the Uptempo podcast covering Auburn, and then all the SEC content that we got right here on the Just a Sec pod. Thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. We're out of here.